Welcome to Yeshiva Daf, your sponsor, Nishma Sam B'Yakosholom Navas Yitzchok. We're holding in Shavuos Daf Chov Daled. Let's go a little bit back just to get into the sugya. We'll start from two dots in the Chov Gimel and Beis, even though we went through it on Shabbos, but just to get into it. The Gemara says Shavuos Shlo Yoichal, and the Gemara, that's what the Mishnah mentions. Says the Gemara, Aguf Akasha. Amar Shavuos Shlo Yoichal ve'ochal ochlim she'ein ruim lachilo. So it says that if he did a shvur not to eat, and he ate things which are not edible, or he drank drinks which are not drinkable, so the din is that he's potter. Then he says, then it says if he eats food which is also minator to eat, is chayov. What's the difference between eating things which are not edible or eating nevelas of trefus? Now, as we mentioned, the previous and Daf Chod Beis and Beis right before the Mishnah, the Gemara answered this question. The Gemara said that shkotzim and mosim nevelas of trefus is edible. It's just also to eat it. And now we're talking about things which are not edible because they're like sand. They're not things which are edible. So that's a big difference. But the Gemara now is coming with another answer at the beginning. Halikashu, Reisha b'stam v'sevim mefarish. The Reish is talking about when he didn't say anything specific. He said, I'm not going to eat. I'm not going to eat does not include something which is not edible. Same as talking about he's clear. He's very clear. He says, I'm going to eat things which are not edible. So the more farish nami hagu v'katik am I mujba me'ar sinai. So you have a problem mujba me'ar sinai. This we went into Shabbos on Shabbos daf, and the idea what is mujba me'ar sinai and how mujba me'ar sinai is something which is very significant because mujba me'ar sinai means that there is already a shvur and he's already also minatoyu. We mentioned Avnei Miluim. Avnei Miluim says that there's two ways to understand why if he's mujba me'ar sinai you can't have another isser. Either because it's isser any suchal isser, or because ain't shvur chalal shvur, meaning ism pshat is already isser, so you can't make the isser again. Or the pshat is already have a shvur me'ar sinai, so you can't make another shvur. And there's a kaminas, because if any Yisrael is, so the Yisrael is still there floating around. And if the first Yisrael goes away, the second Yisrael will be chal. If it's because of the shvur and shvur chal shvur, so then the second shvur does not happen. So he brings up kaminas. But the point is, the ain't shvur chal shvur. Let's take the Musha to tell us. The person is Mushba B'Yim Mar Sinai, so you have already that shvur. You can't have another shvur. So what's Shabdi Kedoisa himself on the Nevelas of Trefus? Rav Shmuel, Rav Yochanan, the Amri, the Koil Dvorim Mutar Midvorim Asurim. What's his Koil? He says, I'm not going to eat kosher meat and treif meat. So he's also himself both kosher and treif. So because he's also in kosher, treif also becomes asur, even though he's also a treif in Atayr. Shlokishoma yet amoitze mefarish chatzishir v'alib derbanon ibistam alib derbakiva. So Rishogish says, similar to what we said earlier in the Masechta, that either he says clearly I'm doing Chatzishir, according to Rabbanon, the whole, they usually talk about, when he says Shavuos, he's talking about Kazais and more, or according to Bekiva, that Shavuos always means a half a shear. That's what he means. The Mois, all the Mois, that's what we call it, that's what Bekiva holds. So we talk about Chatzishir. So Chatzishir is not Mushba Boyim Arasina. As Tais says, what do you mean? Rabbi Yochanan, the Ripaskin like him, holds the Chatzi Shir is also Minatoyo. So says yeah, it's also Minatoyo, but it's not Mujba Boyim Ma'asinai. And we mentioned it, the Daf on the Daf of Friday, mentioned yesterday on Shabbos, the idea that Maritz Chayes brings, that the only reason Chatzi Shir is also is because it may become a full Shir. And it can't be something because a full Shir will come also if we that is mutter. So it has to be it's also, it's not a real issue. The real issue, the issue of the Torah, Mujba Boyim Ma'asinai is only on Kazayis plus. So Emil says, if it's Chatzishir, it's not Mujba Boyim Ma'asinai, he can do a shvur. So Rabbi Yochanan, like Rabbi Shlokish, the Mukim Lo Masis Give Yaakov. Rabbi Yochanan did not say like Rabbi Shlokish. According to Rabbi Shlokish, you have to go into Machlekes, Chatzishir. He said Chatzishir or not. Hello, Rabbi Shlokish, my time in Lo Mak Rabbi Yochanan. Why Rabbi Shlokish not say Rabbi Yochanan? We talk about Yisur Koila. U'machok, Yamrin on Yisur Koila, says the Gemara in Daf Chaf Daled Aleph, Yisur Abo Me'elov, Yisur Abal the Absol Armin. So this Gemara brings you this idea. The Yisur that is coming on its own, then have a din of Yisur Koila. What's the Yisur coming on its own? We'll see it in a moment in the Gemara. is the idea of someone who's Nevela Yom Kippur. A person is also to eat Nevela. Why? Because it's Yisur D'Oraisa, eat Nevela any single day. Comes Yom Kippur, becomes Asur and many other things as well. It becomes also sort of kosher. You can't eat anything on Yom Kippur. So then, the Yisur Koil is also a Treifa as well. There's another Yisur of Yom Kippur, Chal, and Treifa, Yisur Koil. That happens on its own. But here we talk about Yisur that he did himself. He said himself, I'm Asur, a bigger Shvuah. So now you don't say Yisur Koil. Why don't you say Yisur Ba'atzmoi? We're going to bring different explanations, but one explanation is the pshat of the Avnei Milum that we just mentioned. Yisur Ba'atzmoi is because Mushba Voyim Ma'asinai. So he's saying, I can't do another Shvuah if I already have a Shvuah, so there's nothing here. But Yisur, Chal Yisur, so then is one Yisur can't follow another Yisur, but it's still there, it's floating. So if I have a Yisur Koil, it comes on. But Mushba Voyim Ma'asinai, it's something that never happened. Never happened, never occurs. So he does it on his own, it's not Chal. Says the Gemara, that's what we got to in Shabbos. I understand Reb Shimon is pointing. The time Reb Shimon Oimer called Shul Lamakis, because according to Reb Shimon, you always chayav and chatashir. Every time a person eats chatashir is chayav. In other words, the Yisur D'Oraisa of food is not a full shir, it's a chatashir. Hi, what about the idea of kazais and all that? Kazais is only in Gabi Korbanos. Gabi Malkes of Chatashir. So he's Mujba Moim Ma'asina, Chatashir, that's what Shimon holds. There's no such thing as Yisur Yisrael and Treifis. Ela Abi Yochanan, my time in the Bishun Pota, why is Bishun Pota? We have Yisur Koil. Says the Gemara, Midu time in Mishum Yisur Koil, the whole Savor of Yochanan goes to Yisur Koil. Shimon time in the lace the Yisur Koil. Shimon goes to Shita, so he holds there's no such thing as Yisur Koil. He's not agreeing Yisur Koil. What's Yisur Koil again? Yisur Chal Yisur. When you have one Yisur, another Yisur, can you have a second Yisur? How happen in the same thing? So Yisur Koil tells you if the Yisur is Chal on other things, it will be Chal on this thing as well. Like the classic case that we mentioned, the one is going to say now, right now, the idea of Yom Kippur. What's the idea of Yom Kippur? Treifa is also to eat. Comes Yom Kippur because Yom Kippur is Chal on kosher meat. It's Chal also on treif meat. That's why Yisur Koil. Rav Shimon disagrees. The time of Shimon Oimer Achil Nevelu Yom Kippur in Potter. Shimon holds by a person eats Nevelu Yom Kippur is Potter Yom Kippur. It's Chal al Tevelu. It's not Chal al Yom Kippur. Ein Yisur Chal al Yisur. Visual Ishlokish Mashkaret lo Belavein. According to Ishlokish, talk about Chatashir. According to this one, now my Chatashir is Mutar Min HaTorah. So according to Ishlokish, very Gishmak, you can have Lavein. What is Lavein? You can say no, you can say yes. What does it mean? You can say no, you can say yes. Lavein means it says Shelo Yoichal V'Oichal. Meaning you can have both the negative and the positive in the shvuah. A person could say I won't and I will. So Chatashir, he says I won't eat Chatashir. And if he says a shvuah, I will eat Chatashir, it's Chal. Why? Because Min HaTorah is not also Chatashir, like we said, even though it's also Min HaTorah, but you're not Mushva Voyim Ma'asina. So a person can revoke it by saying, I will eat Chatashir. According to Rabbi Yochanan, you say no, so you find it when Akre Bilav, when you're saying, I'm not going to eat. So it says, where is that going to be? Because I'm not going to eat, because you're not allowed to eat. But hey, according to Rabbi Yochanan, we're talking about Yisur Koil. Yisur Koil means he says I'm gonna Yisur kosher meat or treif meat. Can he say I will eat treif meat? He never can say I'm gonna eat treif meat. So there's no lav in. And sure, the requirement is you can say lo yochal, but you can also say avocha. So the Gemara has a problem with this answer. It says the Gemara Elo Kaderova. We're going like Rova. What's Elo Kaderova mean? So according to Rashi, now the Gemara is changing your mind from before. Before we asked the question. So what's the difference between treifis and other Yisur? Why in the beginning of the Mishnah it says, that if he says eat, you say nothing edible is not included, and treifis is included. So it says the Gemara in the beginning, the first answer the Gemara was that the statement was talking about Nefarish. He says clearly, I'm going to eat it. Now the Gemara says differently. The Gemara says, the pshat is like this. There's the same answer the Gemara said before, even though the Gemara didn't say it right now. That's a little doichik in Rashi. It takes here, once it goes with another explanation, where Rashi himself brings. But Rashi goes, the pshat is, we're going with the answer that we learned in Daf Chabes and Beis, Aryu de Ravi Allah, which means, when I'm saying I have to eat, it has to be edible things. Treifis and sand is not edible. Treifis is edible. Why is treifis edible? Because it's food. You can't eat it because it's Yisur D'Oraisa. It doesn't make it not edible. So what are we talking in the Mishnah? We're talking in the Mishnah b'stam, not b'farish. He's not saying I'm not gonna eat treifas. So I'm not gonna eat food. That includes treifas. And that has b'lavein, because he says I'm going to eat food. You could say I'm going to eat food. And then we'll refer only to mutter. The treifas that is also is only when he says, when he's talking about food without specifying. So that's the thing more inside. Look at Doma Rova. Doma Rova shul shul yoichal v'ochal for potter. Meaning, what is we're bringing Rava over here to tell you? According to Rava, the idea is that offer is not edible. Only things which are literally not edible, then they're not there. If you look at Rashi, let's see Rashi, look at the Rava. If you look at the Rava, don't say the answer. To the beginning, the Mishnah is talking about Bestam, the second part is talking about Farish. Something which is not edible, talk about literally not edible, like sand. How you do review alayu? There is it's word lachilo. You have a line, you have a history. The mashkachet labelav and you have no and yes. Abishu shon da lo yochal stomach omar. Imochel nevel lechayah shrei klau bestomoy toim utorim ve'asurim umitzu asurim al de koilo. Ve'hein mashkachet lo da yochal stomach omar. Says tam grid kashwas dvarim utorim bim lo yochal chay. That's what he brings over here. Rashi, with base, that's what today's refers to over here. Is there's another girsa that says mashkachet l'kaderova. I'm talking about that he have an nevelo which is musrachas, which is a stinky nevelo. Talk about nevelo musrachas, and we want to say that that's what it means that he could eat it because there's no issur d'oraisa to eat nevelo musrachas. I'm not going to eat nevelo, but when he says yes, he's saying I'm going to eat nevelo which is spoiled and then doesn't have issur d'oraisa. So Tei Rashi asked on that, and I would base that if so, that's not called an nevelo. So that we didn't not call it nevelo, and also we have to do with the Rava. Just time we talk about the nevelo misrakas. So that's where Rashi doesn't like the chapter is goes to answer this girsa. Okay. Says the Gemara, I'll bring you a raya that what? That nevelo is roy lachilo. What's the raya? According to Rashi. So I'm also to my wife, if I ate today, what did he eat? He ate nevelis. So you see that, wow, the nevelis is edible. Because if it's not edible, he said if I ate. There, he already ate. And he comes down and says, if I ate, I can't be with my wife. So says going to Chodam base, it's as if he is machshav. In other words, it could be that nevelis is not considered to be food. But here, after he ate, he says, if I ate. He's probably referring to that. Right? He shows himself that he's for him, that's food. But here, we don't say that if it was before he ate. So now we're going back to the Yisukos. Remember, the basis of the sugya is that we have a concept called Yisukos, which means we have the concept of Ein Isur Chal Isur. Right? You have an Isur. Something's already Isur. You can't have another Isur on it. But there's exceptions to the rule. And the two exceptions that we're going to refer to in our sugya is Isur Koilel and Isur Moisif. Isur Koilel means, what is Isur Koilel? Isur Koilel means this Isur is Chal on other things, so it will be Chal on this as well. The classic example we spoke about before is Yom Kippur. You have treif, it's already Isur. Comes Yom Kippur. Now it's also for another reason. What's the other reason it's Isur? It's also because of Yom Kippur. I mean, Yom Kippur is really Isur on kosher meat to eat. So koilel with that is also treifus. So I have Isur Yom Kippur and treifa as well. We did Isur koilel. What is Isur Moisif? Isur Moisif is that the same Isur itself is adding now another Isur that did not have before. For example, you have, Rashi brings here an example. So for example, you have blood, right? He brings the example of chelev shel kodesh, a fat. Can you eat chelev shel kodesh? No, because it's chelev, it's fat. Talk about chelev also, but chelev is mutter to gavoya. You can bring it to mizbech, right? You have a ketaras chelev and ve'voyim goes to mizbech. Now, once it becomes a noiser, past the time it makes usur. Now you can't put it on mizbech. So now there's a new isur over here of isur the Isser Gdusha becomes, the Isser Neisser makes it also Mizbech. Because it makes it also Mizbech, it makes it also to the other for another Isser. Meaning, I already had a Isser, but this Isser only touched one point. Now I have a bigger Isser, it touches another point, so it touches the first point as well. So the difference between Isser Koil and Isser Moisef is, Isser Koil is other things. Because other things become Isser, this is included. Isser Moisef is, this thing itself has a greater Isser that's Chal on things that did not Chal before. So that's the thing now. So the Gemara, my time in the Isle Isser Koil. Why we hold Isser Koil works? Isser Moisef. So the Isser Moisef. Isser Moisef, the Gemara understands, in this case we don't have a Machlekes, even though Toys points out that we have a place where this is one of the whole Isser Moisef is not Isser, we don't say that, but Isser Koil. Man the Potter, the Leisli, the Leisli, Kiyoma Isser Moisef Bichad the Chaticho. Shteichad the Chaticho is lo amin. The Isser Moisef is in the same piece. This piece became more Isser. Right? Like we said the example. It was Isser, now they have another Isser, the same piece, which is a bigger Isser, so it's Chal. But the same Isser Koil means that other piece became Isser, meaning this will be included. Right? Does not agree. Person said, I'm not going to eat a Shavuos, I'm not going to eat dates. I'm not going to eat figs. Then he said, I'm not going to eat figs and grapes. So that's called Isser Koil. Isser Koil is, this second Shavuos is Chal on other fruits, on grapes, and it's Chal on figs as well. Shito. How the Tema Isser Abol Me'il or Mino Isser Abol Me'atzul Amino? Kashvan. So here, like we said in Mudav the Svar, here the Isser is not coming on his own. It's not coming on, it's coming because he did a Shavuos. So maybe you won't say Isser Koil. Here the Gemara says you do say Isser Koil, different than what the Gemara said, different than Rish Lakish we said at the beginning of this daf. Meisi Rob asked Rabbo, Meisi Rob, Brady Rabbo, Rob the son of Rabbo, Person can eat one thing, and you'll be chayav 4 chatas and 1 asher. What is it? Ve'eluhem. Tome, shochal chelev. So he's chayav because of chelev. That's issue number 1. V'hu noisar minim kudoshim. Number 2 is chayav because of noisar. Number 3 is chayav because it's hegdish. And number 4, because he's eating, because he's tummy. Right? And B'Yom Kippurim, that's the 5th one. That's the 5th one. Now Rashi goes on to explain what are the 5 Yisurim. Let's see Rashi inside. Rashi explains, because here it's important to remember Yisur Koil Isser Moisef. Talmud Shorach Rashi, it's the 6th line in the middle, not in the narrow lines, but in the wider lines. Talmud Shorach says Rashi, Chai Mishum Chelev, Mishum Noisor, Mishum Kippurim, Mishum Talmud Shorach Tzachodesh, Ari Arba Chatos, V'Hashem Echad Me'ilo. That's the 4 things for eating, and then 1 for Me'ila for violating Kodesh. Afilu Koyin, Gabi Chelev, the Kodesh, Moyelu, Torah Mav, Kol Chelev, Lashem, Abodim, Mekodesh, Kala Me'ilo, Siyam Me'ilo. Now, how does it work, says Rashi? Ve'ani Kulu Isur Chalal Isur Ninu, Al De Koidel, Al De Moisef. Either works of Koidel or Moisef. What is it? We should know the Be'im Nesur Chalal. Once the animal is born, it's also to eat the Chelev. Chelev is the fat you can eat. Agdasho, now became Kodesh. Now, why it becomes Isur Kodesh, a Mehila? Because the Kodesh is Chal on the meat and on the skin. So it's Chal on the fat as well. It's called Isur Kodesh. Because the fat on other things will be Chal on this as well. Havel Noiser, now becomes Noiser. Like we said before. Now it becomes also Mizbeach. Now it becomes Mishum Noiser. So Noiser because of Isur Moisef. Because once past the time that you can eat the carbon, and it goes also to his back. So you is also an Adam as well. Eat to be Gavra, the person becomes Tomei. Now it becomes also another Kachim. It's an Aybaychel, Mishum Tumo, another Isur Koil. Havalim Kippur, now we keep a Kippur. Meaning the Yitzhak Bechul Mishum Kippur, it's an Aybaychel Mishum Kippur, so that's again Isur Koil. Because also in Chul, because also in Kippur. So here, all these Isurim were joining in either with Koil or Moisef. Shabbos, they have another thing. What happens at Shabbos? If you take Siyar on Shabbos, so it'll be another issue. You want to find many Yisurim, here's another issue. You went out on Shabbos. So, no, that's not part of the same thing. Why not? Because the other ones come because of Achilo, because of eating. Here's not because of Achilo, because you're going out. It says Taiser Meir holds that when he eats, when does it become Oitzah? When he swallows the food and it goes into his stomach. That's called the Hanocha Kurtamir. So it also has to do with eating. So according to what you're saying, you got Shvuah, Mashkachet Lo Chamesh, Kegon Shoma, Shvuah Shlo Yochel Tumorim, V'chelev, Nigud Echal Tvorim, Chal Nem Yachelev. You just said, if I do a Shvuah, and the Shvuah is Chilel Dvorim Umutorim and Dvorim Asurim, so it will be Chal, because of Dvorim Umutorim, because Isu Chilel. So why don't you add another thing, Shvuah, to the list? You have all this list, you have another thing, Shvuah. Okay, says the one meaning I want to speak about Yisur that comes on its own, not Yisur that comes because of Shua. Even though you hold the Yasser, I'm not mentioning the list right now. I'm mentioning only the list that happens on its own. Says the one about Hegdish. Hegdish is not Chal on its own because the person was Magdish. So his words. How he says the word Bechor de Gdushos on Erechim. It's Bechor that is born Kaddish, not because he made it Kaddish. If I say, I don't want to speak with something that you can revoke with asking a chacham. Shvuah you can revoke. So more shvuah these b'sheir looked on. Hari egdish, what about egdish you can revoke? Oh, creating b'bchor. Talk about b'chor. By the way, in the first question, today says it in Mudalef, there is another reason why egdish is different because egdish is not also only a name; it's a sort kulal, and shvuah is also only a name. So the one could answer this question. One answer b'chor, which answers both questions. If I say, no, Kiktani Korban Kavuah. Korban Early V'yari looked at. You know why we're not mentioning Shvuah? Because Shvuah is Korban Early V'yari. It depends if he's rich or he's poor. We want to think about a Korban that's the same for everybody. So more are we Thomas Shochel Sakredish to Korban Early V'yari do? So what do you mean? But Thomas Shochel Sakredish is Korban Early V'yari. Depends if he's rich or poor. So more Ben Nossi V'abelazi. Talk about a Nossi. Nossi is a king or a head of a Shevet. So a Nossi may be Seir. Nossi doesn't have Early V'yari. He brings a fixed Korban. So that the rice can talk about not oil of Rav Ashi, another answer. Kiktani mi the chaylik yeshir shvuah. The chaylik b'chmeshir l'ktani. Sorry, the chaylik yeshir. Shvuah the chaylik b'chmeshir l'ktani. I'm talking only things that have to be a kazai. So have to be a certain amount, as the Gemara says in a moment. Shvuah can be even a mashu. So that's why I'm not mentioning shvuah. For egdish, but what about egdish? Egdish can be less than a shir. You understand? How about in shepruto? It can be less than kazai. It has to be shepruto. For Avashim Yaviro Mavzeiro, another answer. Kiktani is doing a chorus. Is doing a lav like that. I want to think something that if you did it amazing, is chayav chorus. Something is chayav only lav, like shvuah, so we don't say. So what about Oshom is doing a lav? What about the Oshom? What about Meila? Meila, if you did it amazing, only lav. For Kiktani, and so the one that Chayamudah bechatos kamina. We're not talking about the Oshom. The Oshom should be right. Talking about the chatos. The list of chatos is only on something which is doing a chorus, and shvuah, it's a chatos as well. I don't want to mention that. If you know, I'm another answer. The only things that happen on achila, like a noisor, like a trait, like a tome, shvuah the chayil amida b'achilu l'ktani. Shvuah it happens even when something is not food. You can say shvuah, I'm not going to touch the table, I'm not going to sit and cheer. So what about hegdish the chayil nami eitzim v'avonim? I want to say, what are you even talking about? Hegdish can be chayil on things that are not food. The kiktani is the one where it corrects it. The chayil amida is being a shasha. But something that has nashoshes, it's tangible. Shvuah the chayil amid the lazy nashosho, when she isha mishlo isha l'ktani. Shvuah is chal also on something which doesn't have any mamoshes, like sleeping. Person can say, "I do a shvuah, I'm not going to sleep." I do this shvuah, I'm not going to sleep. Right? Can you do that? Shvuah, you're not going to sleep, so you are. It's not something which is tangible, but shvuah is chal on it. So that's why it's on the list. So the Gemara brought here. What is really the sugi for the last time? The Gemara said that when a person does a shvuah and he is adding on this shvuah something which becomes usher, so then he can add to it also things which are already usher. Either things which already has a shvuah on it, or things that are also midiraisa. I can add it. I could say shvuah shleich. He said shvuah shleich. Like more talk about shvuah shleich al tmoyim, and then said tmoyim anavim. So the tmoyim also will become usher again. Saying on the Torah, that's like one understands. So says the Gemara, if so, why don't we mention a list of things which you could be bringing a carbon on? Why brings a full list? Why don't bring this as well? So the Gemara brings several answers to tell me why it's not mentioned in the list for different reasons. And the Gemara, that's the Gemara's day for this question. And the Gemara stays with the Kipto that shvuah could be chal with the isur koilel. So Gomer Rabbi, so we'll stop over here. Continue for the Mishnah in the next half.